You have turned my heart into paper, not flesh and blood, all red and strong, just paper that falls down quick, that lights up the dawn like a terrible sun, undulating and exposed like a snake crossing the curtain. Just paper that folds into a footnote, whose diamond spine creases like water in a wall, or like the shell of a walnut, sweetening from the inside. Just paper that traces meaning like a fisherman's line after nightfall, trembling like a glove or a ghost before the dawn. Just paper that sits in my body like a square moon in the dark, brittle as a bright white porcelain until the stain of speech moves on. Just paper that floats up like a zeppelin and falls like a garland of stones, all pulped and tarnished and bitter, expectant as yellow dough. Just paper whose edges are endings curling back into the promise of love, sinking further into the floor crease, beating like a broken silver fish. What if is a powerful thing. Who needs spaceships and cosmic intelligences when the mind itself is enough to tear apart the known world with its infinite new discoveries? So it was with all my travelling in time. The solidity of a past leading to a future has never been the guiding principle of my life. Instead, it's as if the rest of the world were drawn on graph paper, moving through the thinly marked squares of events laid out in complex systems and codes, following beginnings and ends, causes and effects. At some point along the line, my paper got crumpled, and all the codes of cause and effect were lost. If I'd been made of another kind of material, I might have lived in a mechanical relationship to right and wrong, to the ethics of a life without any real consequence. But this isn't quite the measure of it. Time itself is the marker of bodies, and so it is more imbued with justice than any other phenomenon. It's strange that it took me so long to realise that my problem wasn't with the lack of justice in the world, or with the memories that I lived over and over. My problem wasn't even necessarily with time, but with time's immense scales. I'd been living across the threads of one short lifespan, but my body contained so many histories. I needed to come alive, to animate myself differently inside the footnote I continued to make with my life. I needed to cross the page and tear down the known text that was written for me, but never by me. What if is a serious thing. It gives birth to the world. We need new stories. We need to restory the world. I'm walking alone in the woods again. Uncertain of what these thoughts are, I'm not thinking about him or her or they. I've stopped, for a time at least, ordering my universe around people. I'm not even certain if running this research project is a good idea anymore. Bathory's story told of the deep injustices perpetrated against women over and over again. But this was a cautionary tale. This is how it has always been. And cautionary tales are told for a reason. Beware, there's real danger here. I could feel her, not as the subject of my research, but as the girl, whose life had unwound before me when I had first hovered between worlds. The girl who had always seen me across time. The presence that had made itself known in the wall, or in the strange moments when I stopped haunting my own life and appeared to her. I saw her winding her way towards something difficult, something that would send shockwaves through the world she lived in, and I knew she had been begging me to write it down once I had uncovered it. To help her tell it all differently would be an act of courage. It would fly in the face of caution. And she was listening to me, to my stories, and as much as I was writing her, scribbling snatches of her world down in notebooks and half-finished documents on my computer, she was in turn writing me. Her stories were affecting my choices, like all stories we hear do. I could hear her amassing her strength like blood in my own body. At times I felt I could hear so well and so clearly that it was almost like seeing. She would show up at the edges of my awareness, whisper something just audible enough for me to hear. I believed that we were living across each other, electromagnetic in our encounters. She was inside the walls and the doors, inside the world, but also invariably inside me. She was in my bones, and I remembered her. I saw Nadasti, her husband. I saw her press, her castle, her silver wedding ring. I saw her dream me as I dreamt her, lying in the field, in the snow, my blood ebbing from a wound at the side of my head, drinking in the words of our angel of death, and walking out, back into life, to restory the world. Time is lively. Time is alive. After I heard Nadasti's story, or more precisely after I'd remembered hearing Nadasti speak his story to Elizabeth inside my bones, I became hesitant to arrange all my relationships to life around the people that I knew in it. They seemed small, so full of tiny quarrels that led to unspeakable things playing out across the planet's surface until they dug in, penetrating even its crust. Humans seemed to me like large shadows cast by time, and because of this we all lived in shadows, as shadows. We were all made of insubstantial darknesses that we spun on the loom of our bones into life stories. A patterned carpet, unwoven only in the holy fire of deep forgetting. I wanted to tell Nadasti the story of time. I wanted to tell him to watch the crocuses in the fields and to understand that the root structures inside all things are more representative than a life, than any short-term bloom. I wanted to tell him that this was no fatalism, that inside these roots and passages was where all the freedom he was hungry for lay, that we could bloom differently along any line in space or time, that choice is about making new differences, tiny differences that go unnoticed by the large, ignominious sword of history that doesn't necessarily realise when it's being rewritten. But if I knew this, then so did Elizabeth, and she would tell him. She would tell him all the way back in the past, and so I would have haunted myself in the future present. Whenever I felt Elizabeth in my bones, I was listening deeply. I knew we were diffractions of one another, one soul stretching across time, playing ourselves out across a great silence of women. I understood that to restory her from out of the prison history had made, I had to write her through myself. History had locked her up, made her into the shape of the Blood Countess, But this wasn't unique to her. It was something shared by all women in one way or another. As I wrote her out of her prison, so she rewrote me, shifting all our histories subtly. She rewrote me in the letters she sent to the Emperor, in the books she printed, applying the legend "for the future" to some copies, curling the letters written in her own hand in ink. Soon she would write of me directly, delivering her knowledge of our world right now to the Emperor, in the hope that it might in some tiny way restory him. We would all emerge differently in time through each other. When she scribed me, it would change in tiny increments the life I lived. When I scribed her, she would break the chains that made her, finding the other inside her, her own silent people across time. Would that we could all find our own inner narrators, erasing our position in space, in the past, present and future, in an endless, brave momentum taking place in women's time.